Podcept, the podcast from Deutsche Bank Research, with interviews on current economic and financial topics. Listen as economists and analysts from Deutsche Bank present their views.
Welcome. So which are the world's cheapest and most expensive cities? Where will the pound or euro or dollar in your pocket go furthest? Where's the best place to live, eat, and go on a date? I'm Adrian Cox. I'm here with my colleague Jim Reid from our thematic research team, who's just published the latest edition of his definitive Mapping the World's Prices report for the Deutsche Bank Research Institute. So Jim, you've been tracking global prices for many years now. What are the biggest changes you've seen in this period?
Yeah, thank you, Adrian. Yes, we've been doing this report since 2012, and I think what I'm struck by is that when I first started this report, US cities were generally outside the top 10 in both prices of goods and services and salaries when compared to their international peers. Today, they're right up with Zurich and Geneva as the most expensive places in the world and with the highest salaries. So that's probably the biggest change. I would also say one of the other big changes is that in the quality of life indices that we have, the mega cities have progressively gone down year after year, which is an interesting development.
So what about these leading global financial centres like London, New York, Tokyo, Paris? Where do they rank and why is that?
Yeah, it is interesting because if you look at the kind of mega financial cities, which we're looking at in this report, Tokyo is 26 on quality of life, Paris is 44, Hong Kong 48, and London and New York are tied at 50, so pretty low down. And I think, they're hampered on this basis by, expensive housing, longer commutes, higher than average pollution levels, and that has definitely got worse. And property prices have gone up over that period. And I think we've got to remember, though, it is highly subjective. So not everybody would share the kind of criteria we've picked, and other people might value the cultural richness of a city. They might value the social connections you can make in a city, and we can't capture that in the data. But on a kind of more quantifiable metrics, they've certainly become less attractive to live in than they were in the past.
Then looking at your quality of life index, interesting, Luxembourg comes top. What is Luxembourg's secret sauce, and is there anything that it can teach other cities?
Yeah, I suppose Luxembourg tops a list of smaller European cities that are edging up year after year. And I think that's because, because they're cities, you still have the financial reward. But these smaller cities probably score better on pollution, much shorter commuting times. Property market hasn't gone quite so crazy in terms of going up. And therefore, I think people are slowly more attracted to them, and they score better on a quality of life basis. Luxembourg actually has free public transport now, so that doesn't do it any harm in terms of these measures. I suppose one of the interesting climbers, though, is Frankfurt, which now comes in at 7th on our list. And I think it combines it being a big financial city and all the rewards you get from that, with actually having a slightly less hectic pace of life and shorter commutes, etc. So that's a surprise package in the report.
And one of the phrases that you use actually is peak pricing, which you refer to in relation to the US. What exactly does that relate to? And is that a blip? What's changing? Is that something which is going to be prolonged, do you think?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, the US was one of the cheaper places internationally, or certainly outside the top 10 back in 2012, and it's now right up there at the top. And I think that reflects a few things. Firstly, the US dollar was relatively cheap in 2012. Today, it's relatively expensive relative to its longer-term valuations. There's also a story of US exceptionalism over the recent years. You've had, Wall Street success, and importantly, you've had a tech sector boom, and the tech sector, as we know, is US-led. So all of those have combined to make US go from a country with cities outside the top 10 to really nudging up against number one spot in many of our categories.
Now, one of the really interesting aspects of the report was what it said about India. A lot of those cities looking very cheap. Is that an investment opportunity, or is that a risk factor, do you see?
Yeah, when we did the data, I think India surprised me most because it will be the third largest economy within a few years, definitely by the end of the decade. But I suppose in looking at it and thinking about it, I suppose India's growth has been, fast growth has been very rapid, but it still is a developing country. And if you look at India on a per capita basis, GDP, or a purchasing power basis, it actually ranks outside of the top 100 comfortably when you look at the list of countries. So it's a bit of a dichotomy between soon to be the third largest country in the world, but with per capita income that is outside the top 100. Now, given what we know about the forward for India, the fabulous demographics, the rapid growth, I would expect there to be pretty big catch up there. So when we do this report in 5 or 10 years' time, I'd expect Indian cities to be climbing the rankings in terms of most expensiveness and also in terms of salaries across the board.
Yeah, one area where we definitely see a lot of expense is in utility costs, particularly in Germany, where 3 of the top 4 cities are among the most expensive for that. And I think about 18 of the top 20 cities overall are in Europe for utility costs. What does that actually mean for manufacturing, for production, for potential industrial output in Europe?
Yes, first we'll look at why that's the case. I think Germany's had a few unfortunate situations occur within a relatively short space of time. They lost access to Russian gas. They've phased out nuclear energy and also concentrated on renewable energy, which is great for the future, but it does come at a higher cost in the short term. So those things have made German cities the most expensive in the world in terms of utility bills. And obviously, Germany is the industrial heartland of Europe, so higher energy costs is not great for the economy. But obviously, we've got the new German government putting in place a huge infrastructure spend, and a part of that is trying to address the energy problem. So I think these are things that are being dealt with in terms of policy, but it is stark from the data that German cities are the most expensive for utility bills. And other Central to Eastern European cities are not far behind, and that is a proximity to Russia and where they previously got their gas from that they no longer can.
And one of the interesting aspects of this report, and I think probably quite well known now, is the cheap date index, which you have. What is this, and what does it say about where I should be taking my wife out for dinner to impress her?
Yeah, our cheap date index is supposed to reflect a relatively restrained but enjoyable night out with a partner or a prospective partner. In that, we include a bottle of wine, a dress, a pair of jeans.
Quite a generous night out then.
Well, yes. I mean, I must admit, I don't think I bought a pair of jeans every time I went on a date, but that's the nature of the index.
Yeah.
2 coffees, a meal, 2 cinema tickets, public transport, and then a taxi home. So actually, it's quite an extensive list of goods and services, and covers a selection of the stuff we've got in our report. So it's a nice way of aggregating it. On this, Geneva and Zurich are the most expensive, but Copenhagen, Oslo, and London are places where that make up the rest of the top 5, and you might be advised to stay in and watch the telly if you're comfortable in your relationship. I mean, interestingly, at the other end of the spectrum, there's some nice places that are very cheap to go on a date. So Cairo, Rio, and Cape Town, are half to a third of the cost of our top cities. But obviously, if you're taking your wife there, you might want to consider the airfare as part of the cost that we're not including.
Yeah, I think that's a classic externality, isn't it, that one? What about looking ahead to 2030 and thinking of your boldest prediction for then? Which cities are really going to be on the march, and which cities do you think are going to be falling down the ranks?
Yeah, I mean, I've mentioned this before. I do think the US is probably at peak pricing now. The US dollar is very expensive internationally, and I think the policies of the administration are probably going to be biased to moving the dollar down over the years ahead. And therefore, I think the US cities are probably going to slip down our rankings in the years to come. I think European cities probably will edge up the rankings. I think the euro will probably edge up in the years to come. And then, obviously, as I've said, India, I think, is probably the place where cities will go up the rankings most in the next several years.
And if I was someone who, or let's say we've got listeners here who are thinking about making an international move or making an international investment in the coming year or so, what's the one thing that they should take away from this report?
Yeah, I mean, if you were looking at where to move, if you were lucky enough to have job offers from a load of different places.
69 different cities, for example, the ones in the survey.
Yep. Switzerland has got a very good track record of maintaining purchasing power. And its salaries are, at the top of the charts, and they have been around the top for some time. And I think that's a lot about policy. The Swiss franc has been one of the few currencies to appreciate against the dollar in the last 12, 13 years since we first did the report. And to be honest, if you go back 20, 30, 40, 50 years, the Swiss franc is the best performing currency. So Swiss policy has maintained purchasing power better than any other. So if you are offered a job in Switzerland, financially, you might be wise to at least consider it.
Thank you. Now, let's do a quick fire round with truth or myth on a number of questions. So, number one, Switzerland is the world's most expensive country. Truth or myth?
I think that would be true. Switzerland comes consistently at the top of our rankings year on year.
And why is that?
I think it's because of the consistency of policy. The Swiss franc has been one of the few currencies that have constantly appreciated against the dollar in the last decade, 2 decades, 5 decades.
Higher cost of living usually means higher salaries. Truth or myth?
Yes, I would say that's true. Normally they go hand in hand across most, especially developed market cities.
It doesn't make much of a difference if you rent an apartment or buy an apartment in an expensive city. The more expensive, the more expensive.
That's not quite true in the case of the US, which has a huge split between renting and buying. So across our rental indices, US cities are pretty much all in the top 10. We have 5 cities, US cities in the report. They pretty much all in the top 10. If you look at it to buy, though, US cities are further down the list. And I think that's because the US is a bigger place. There's less urban sprawl. So a lot of the cities in our report are very densely populated with not much room to expand. So you tend to get a supply and demand issue. Obviously, that's there for US cities, but it's probably a little bit less intense. The one thing I would say, though, is although the sticker price of apartments in US cities are lower, mortgage costs are higher. So if you adjusted for that, it might net out a little bit more neutrally.
Italy really is the place of la dolce vita when it comes to coffee and to wine. Truth or myth?
I think that's true. In researching this study, I found it was absolutely true that to buy a coffee in Italy is much cheaper than elsewhere, and to be fair, wine as well. And I think the culture in Italy is that the locals expect to, as a right, to have a cheap coffee or a cheap glass of wine. And I think the bars, coffee houses, etc., realise this and don't overcharge and attract a local community in. So yes, Italy is a very good place to live if you like coffee and wine.
There are only 3 certainties in life: death, taxes, and rising London transport prices. Truth or myth?
I think that is true, which explains why I tend to walk everywhere around the city rather than get on the tube. London does have by far and away the highest public transport costs in the world. I would say as a caveat that the public transport network in London, say, is probably one of the most extensive in the world. So you're probably paying for a pretty extensive transport network, but prices are certainly very high relative to international peers.
The characters in Friends, Seinfeld, and Sex and the City could never afford their huge New York apartments now. Truth or myth?
I think that would be absolutely true. I think in the time we'd be doing the report, prices have gone up much higher than salaries, and that's over the last 13 years. But obviously those programs were probably 25 years ago now, and maybe even a bit longer, and I think that would be even more exaggerated. Double
denim is a luxury best enjoyed in the US. Truth or myth?
Yes, although the US is up there in the most expensive cities for most products, goods, services, actually the one thing where you can get jeans relatively cheaply is in the US. So when you're next over in the US for holiday or for business, pick up a pair of jeans there.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jim. Thank you for listening or watching. We hope you've enjoyed it. And if you want to find out more, then have a look at the Deutsche Bank Research Institute, where we have the full report, plus many other reports on everything from geopolitics to macroeconomics to the corporate landscape and technology. Thank you. See you again next time.
Podcept, the podcast from Deutsche Bank Research. This podcast has been produced by Deutsche Bank and may contain research as defined in MiFID II. The information discussed is believed to be reliable and has been obtained from public sources believed to be reliable, although Deutsche Bank makes no representation as to its accuracy or completeness. Opinions, estimates, and projections discussed constitute the current judgment of the speaker at the time of recording. They do not necessarily reflect the opinions of Deutsche Bank and are subject to change without notice. For further important information, please visit research.db.com.